President Trump warning the Iranian regime that it will hit them very hard if Iran doesn't come to the table and strike a deal to end the war. Trump says those strikes could happen as soon as this weekend. And Trump's renewed threat comes as Iran has launched a new wave of attacks against U.S. military bases in the Middle East. The U.S. military, in response, maintaining that naval blockade against Iranian ships. CENTCOM says so far they have redirected 30 vessels. Meanwhile, Iran is threatening to attack U.S. and Israeli energy infrastructure if the U.S. launches that next round of strikes. And this morning, the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem says U.S. citizens in the region should consider leaving. Alex Hogan is in Bridgewater, New Jersey, with more. Alex.
Hi, Brian. So the White House says that a new round of strikes could take place on Iran as early as this weekend and that it would last at least several days. The president is here in New Jersey at his golf club this weekend. Yesterday, he was at Camp David, where he held the first ever televised cabinet meeting there, pointing to a renewal of heavy strikes, signaling that there is no off-ramp to this conflict yet.
We're in there for 5 months. You know, I know what people like to say, because we're doing a much bigger job, much more important job than we originally anticipated. So we're in there for 5 months, and if you look at Vietnam, they were in there for 20 years. You look at Afghanistan, they were in there for many years.
Democrats argue the longer this goes on, the list of Iranian threats only continues to grow.
Remember, he said help is on the way. Getting rid of their proxies. The Houthis are still shooting. In fact, they're more engaged than ever. We have a younger, angrier Ayatollah 2.0 in charge of the country now, permanently ending any path towards a nuclear weapon.
Meantime, new efforts to end the conflict between Israel and Hamas. President Trump says the U.S. and Israel are aligned on plans. Under this agreement, Hamas would turn over weapons and Israel would withdraw from Gaza. Secretary of State Marco Rubio addressed this disarmament deal.
On Hamas is another big step as well. It's something a lot of people thought would never happen. It needs to happen.
Meantime, new concern in the Middle East today with the U.S. Embassy in Israel warning any Americans thinking of traveling to the region, they should reconsider those plans, and any Americans in the region, they should either be considering leaving or be prepared to leave if there is new escalation. Brian.
Alex Hogan live in Bridgewater, New Jersey. Alex, thank you. Retired U.S. Air Force Brigadier General John Teichert joins me now. General, thank you so much for being here with us this morning. We want to start, obviously, with the President Trump reportedly ordering strikes that could start as early as this weekend, and these strikes could be the harshest yet. There's two streams of thought here, General. There's the one option where he could go big. That is, go for maybe 2 weeks and attack missile sites in Iran once and for all, potentially pushing them to surrender. There's another option, though, that CBS is reporting, that he could go after power infrastructure in Iran. Which way do you think the president should go here?
Brian, the first option that you described is essentially more of what we've been doing for the last 5 months, and it's depleted our weapon stockpiles. It hasn't changed the regime's calculus, and it hasn't allowed us to achieve our strategic objectives. The president's inclination, his instinct for the last 5 months has been to strike at these more strategic sites, energy sites, power plants, logistics and transportation nodes, and that would fundamentally strike at the heart of the regime. It would erode their sources of strength and power. It would hit the things they value most. And I strongly recommend that the president chooses the latter option to ultimately change the regime or the calculus of the regime.
So if you talk about attacking energy infrastructure, you're talking about bombing power plants and refineries. You're talking about affecting civilian life in Iran. How do you do that without losing any sort of goodwill in Iran and perhaps causing a civilian catastrophe in Iran?
Brian, I'm not suggesting that you bomb those sites wholesale, that strategic planners should be able to map every target and every site to the regime. And I keep going back to Kharg Island. 90% of the regime's financing comes through that one single island. You could neuter the regime and strangle the regime, giving them no resources by hitting that one island. And again, you're very strategic in your selection of targeting. You don't hit it all. You hit those things that value most to the regime.
The president has been hesitant about putting ground troops on the ground here in Iran, and for good reason. Obviously, if you put troops in Karg Island, which is the oil mega infrastructure for Iran, critics say you put them really just so close to Iran being able to strike and cause major casualties. Do you think that the president needs to put troops in Karg Island? And what do you say to those critics who say that that would put our troops in too much in harm's way?
Brian, I agree that it's a high-risk option, which is why I want the president to select the option where we use those targeted strategic strikes to impact those things that I described earlier. And I think until you give that a try, and I believe it would be successful, then there's no way that you should select the high-risk option, which is putting troops on the ground on Iranian territory.
You know, but why do you think you can bomb your way out of this? I mean, for those who think that, you know, we haven't seen any kind of evidence so far that this regime, we first of all, we don't even know who's entirely in charge here, and that's causing a ton of issues. But what makes you think that an air campaign here would be enough for this regime to surrender? Because as of right now, it seems to be, to me, that the regime believes that escalation is the only way out, and the United States right now seems to believe that escalation is the only way out, which is a scary place to be, General.
Brian, all of these thousands of strikes leading up to this point have hit a lot of military targets, but the regime doesn't care about the U.S. striking military targets. It cares about its grip on power. It cares about its financing. And I don't know if a strategic bombing campaign like the one I described could eliminate the regime, but it would take away the resources that the regime relies upon to suppress internally and to threaten externally. And if that means that we strike those type of targets and give them no resources going forward, even if the regime remains, it means they don't have the potency to do the things that would harm us and our interests.
And quickly, are you concerned about the lack of missile defense interceptors that we have, or are our supply dwindling? Apparently, we have less than half of what we had before this war began.
Brian, that's all the more reason not to go with an option that allows this war to continue on for another several months, but to strike at the heart of the regime. And while in the short term that may require a lot of interceptors that we already have in theater, that it would end this a lot quicker than allowing this thing to trickle on by just striking military targets.
Okay, we shall see. Again, those attacks could begin as soon as this weekend, perhaps even during the show. Who knows? General John Teichert, thank you.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.